Hi guys, Jamie here from JB Motion. In today's video we're going to be creating these cool HUD rings. Now what I've done is I created a HUD map, kind of a reference inside of Illustrator in 2D, just something that I'm going to use as I'm going over and back for setting the scene up in Cinema 4D. We're not going to be talking about how I created this in Illustrator in depth, but I will talk about how I created one of the more complicated elements of this HUD map inside of Illustrator. Now, for any of you who don't have Illustrator or who have no interest in looking at it, you'll be able to skip that part and you'll be able to download any of the output from Illustrator. So any of the PNG files that we're going to be using in our Cinema 4D scene, you'll be able to download those from the description below. Once we have our scene set up in Cinema, we're going to be rendering it out and we're going to be talking about how we can go about making changes such as adding glow and changes of color to our render inside of After Effects. So let's get started on this. Here we go. Okay, so this is our, well, I've called it a HUD map. So it's just going to be a reference that I've created in Illustrator. Just something that I can kind of follow along and create each part in Cinema 4D step by step kind of thing. So you can see here in the middle I'm going to have my logo, my JB logo there, and then beneath that the first part that we're going to create in Cinema right now is going to be this kind of grid. It's basically just a disk in Cinema 4D with a grid using a tile shader, and we're using a gradient to kind of fade it out as it goes towards the edges. So let's do that now. So we can jump into Cinema and we can grab a disk object. And if I just turn on my lines, NB on your keyboard, you can see we have a lot of segments that we don't need. So let's just bring disk segments down to 1. We can leave rotation segments as they are for now. And now we can create a new material. We'll call this center disk. And let's apply that to our disk object. Let's also call this center disk. And now let's open up this material. So we're going to turn off color and reflectance, turn on the alpha channel, and we need to add a tiles shader. So that's going to give us our squares. So you can see that's what we're looking for, these kind of squares. So we're getting that with this tile shader. So let's jump into the tiles shader now, and we need to set everything except for the grout to black. So this is going to be black, this is going to be black, and the grout color is going to be white. So the grout is the only part of this that we want to see anything in. The rest is going to be transparent. So now that we have that done, if we add some color, we can do that in the luminance channel. Now it's going to be white. If I render that, you can see that we're getting that white color there from our luminance. You can see that also if I bring this cube below it, it's transparent where the squares are. So that's what we're looking for. We also want to show this kind of gradual fading towards the edge of our disk. So to do that, we need to go back into our alpha channel and we need to put this tiles shader into a layer shader. So let's do that now. Now we can go into the layer shader and you see we have our tiles, and now we need to add in a gradient so that we can gradually fade out towards the edge of our disk. So if we go shader, gradient, and let's change this gradient to circular. And if we invert that gradient, and we just drag this black knot, I think it's called, yeah, knot, further over, now we can see that we're getting the gradual fading, but it isn't actually working. And the reason for that is because, I'm just going to go back here and again, image alpha is turned on. Now, once you turn this off, it should work. Okay, hang on a second now. It's not working again. We need to go into our layer shader and set the blending mode to multiply. Now we have it. So basically, turning image alpha off fixes the problem there. Now, I don't know why it fixes the problem. I just got lucky. I turned it off when I was trying to set this up earlier and it worked. So you guys can go into the help there and read about image alpha if you want to know the magic behind the image alpha tick button. But that's good to go. Let's put in some actual color for this. I'm going to go for something like this kind of a color. Something like that. And I'll turn on my interactive render region so we don't have to keep rendering this, so we can see what we're getting. And there we kind of have it. So we have to do a few things first of all. So we need to make this crisper. It's very blurry at the moment. So to do that, go into your material, go into the alpha channel, open up that layer shader that we created and go into the tile shader within it. And let's set the bevel width to 5. That sharpens up those lines. If we jump back into our HUD map, you can see that the squares are actually a lot bigger. So if we want to make the squares bigger in Cinema 4D, what we need to do is mess around with this global scale. So we can say 150 for the global scale, then we'll get bigger squares. So I'm going to go for something like 130 or something like 120 maybe. So it's not exactly as it is in the HUD map, but I'm going to be making small changes as I go along, just as I see fit, I suppose. If you guys want bigger squares, just bring that right up, that global scale, up to like 150 or something, and you'll get bigger squares. So I'm going to go 120 for my one, and I'm happy enough with that. So that's the first part of our HUD rings setup. Next, we're going to create this shape here. So to do that, we're going to be using an atom array object, which is this here. So let's just turn off our interactive render region for the time being, Alt-R on your keyboard, and we're going to create a tube. Let's reduce the inner radius to about this value, and we can bring the height down to 0.1. Now if we create if we add in an atom array object, what we can do actually before we do that is, quick shortcut, is select your tube, hold down Alt, just hold down Alt and then grab your atom array. That automatically adds the tube, the selected object, as a child of the atom array. Okay, so now we have our atom array. We can reduce the size of this down a little bit, and we need to do something about the size of these spheres and the size of the cylinders. So let's bring down the cylinder radius to about 0.25 and the sphere radius the same. And we can go into our tube object and increase the rotation segments, or decrease, depends on what you're looking for, I suppose. But I'm going to increase mine, and it's to about 50. I'm going to create a new material, and this is going to be just a solid color, and I'm going to grab the exact same color that I've set up for this grid here. So I'm going to go into my luminance channel, go into the hex code and grab that. Now I'm going to turn off color in this new material here. Turn off color and reflectance. We're just going to use luminance, and I'm going to paste in that hex code. And then we can apply that to our atom array. So now if we hit Alt-R, you'll see that that's set up and ready to go. Okay, so the next part is this line here. So for this we're going to be using a spline and a sweep and a shader. We're going to be using a mod shader, displacement shader. So let's create first of all our circle spline. Let's turn off our interactive render region, Alt-R on your keyboard. Set this circle spline plane to be XZ. And just because that's how I'm feeling, you know? Just feeling like I want it to be on the inside. You guys can have it on the outside, you can have it on the inside, you can have it really close to the grid. I'm just going to put mine on in between the atom array object and this grid here. So we have our circle. Let's create some geometry. So we can grab a sweep, hold down Alt again, making sure that the circle spline is selected, which it is. You can see it's highlighted in yellow. Hold down Alt before we grab that. Now it'll automatically add the circle spline as a child of the sweep. And now we need to give it a cross section. So we're going to use a rectangle for that and make it a child of the sweep. Now we're getting the geometry that we wanted, but we just need to reduce the height to 0.1 and the width will go 1. And we can apply this same color to it. Okay, so to get this displacement, as I said, we're going to be using a shader deformer, or not a shader, we're going to be using the Displacer Deformer, and we're going to be using the mod noise to get this kind of an effect. So we need to make the displacer, I think it's called displacer. Yeah, the Displacer Deformer a child of the circle spline. Now as you can see over in my object manager, the circle spline is selected, it's highlighted in yellow. Now I want to make the displacer a child of it for this to work. Now before we wanted to make the, I want to make the displacer a child of the circle spline. Before we were using Alt to, what were we doing? We were using Alt. So if I hold down Alt in here, jump into it, go to mod noise here, it is there. And now we're getting our noise there. Let's increase the global scale to 500%. And we need to go into our circle spline, reduce the angle to 0. That'll give us more definition. But we still need more definition than that. So we need to make this circle spline editable. So we can just select it and we can click on this make editable or use C on your keyboard. And that becomes editable. Now if I go into point mode, just so you guys can see what's happening, and if I hit US on my keyboard, you'll see that we're subdividing this circle spline. We're getting extra points along it. So I'll go US again, and I'll go US again, and again. That should be enough points to give us some nice definition. So let's turn on our interactive render region, Alt-R on your keyboard, and you can see what the effect that that's having. Now, I want to increase the height of this, so we can select our displacer, we can scale this up to get a bit more detail, something like that. Alternatively, you can just go into the Object tab of the Displacer object and mess around with the height of that. Same thing. So if we go back into our HUD map here in Illustrator, you can see that we have a lot less kind of, ridges, a lot less detail in this. So we can just, to replicate that, we can go into our Displacer Deformer, go into Shading, open up this Noise shader, and increase the global scale. Something like that. And now we're getting a lot less detail. I might bring down the height as well. And I might go back into my global scale and bring it down actually a little bit. Okay, so I'm happy enough with that. Next, we are going to create this guy here. Now, for this guy, we actually need to create this in Illustrator. Well, we don't need. We could set it up in Cinema, but it would take a bit longer than... I suppose it's a lot quicker to just set it up in Illustrator, export it as a PNG, and then we can use that there. So how do we create this in Illustrator? Well, I'm just going to show you guys how we can do something like that. We're going to create a circle. I'm just hovering over just to get my center point. If you guys aren't getting these smart guides, just go to View, and turn on Smart Guides. Now, don't worry if you don't have Illustrator. I am going to be providing links to the PNG, so you'll be able to download that if you guys don't have Illustrator. So I'm going to hold down Alt, and I'm going to click and drag, and I'm going to hold down Shift. So we're going to get a perfect circle. And once we have our circle, we're going to turn off Fill, select it, turn it off, and we're going to increase the stroke to about 70 points. Then we're going to go Object, Path, Outline, Stroke, and then if I hit Shift X on my keyboard, or just click on this little swap fill and stroke, that'll do that for us. And we just have this outline. So if we jump back here, you can see that we have some of them with lines and some of them without. So let's create the lines right now. So I'm just going to find my center point again. You can see the Smart Guides are turned on. I'm going to create a point here, hold down Shift so that this is going to go straight up. And I'm going to create another point. Use my direct selection tool. Hit Escape now so we can get rid of that, close that spline. Direct selection tool, which is here, or A on your keyboard, and then we can grab this point here and go, hold down Shift and go 1, 2, 3, 4 on your right arrow keys. Let's grab this one and go 1, 2, 3, 4 on your left arrow keys. Now we need to duplicate this in a circle. So how do we do that? Let's grab that, and let's grab our Rotate tool, R on your keyboard, and we need to find our center point. So how do we do that? It's not very easy. It's not showing up now in my Smart Guides. What I can do is draw a very small circle, Shift X to fill it, and then center align that in our document. And now we'll be able to get a Smart Guide when we hover over the center. So let's select this line, hit R on your keyboard, for Rotate tool, and now we'll be able to find the center there. Hold down Alt. See, when we're holding down Alt, those dots appear. You need to hold down Alt and then click to open up the Rotate dialog box. Now we can basically type in how many lines we want to duplicate around in a circle. So we're going to go around 360 degrees, and we're going to divide that by the amount of lines that we want. So I'm going to go for something like 60. Click on Copy, and we get 1. Now we're going to hold down Control and hit D. Control D to duplicate, and that's going to go all the way around. If you just hold D, it'll actually do it really quick. But we don't need it to go that far. We just need one kind of section of this, and then we can duplicate that also. So we have that much done. We need to get rid of the parts that are sticking out. So select everything, hold down Shift and press M in your keyboard. That'll open up your Shape Builder tool. And now we can delete these sticky out parts. So if you look at this cursor, you can see there's a plus beside it. We want to change that to minus. Hold down Alt, changes to minus. Then we can delete all these just by clicking and dragging. Okay, so that's not working. What I'm going to do is I'm going to outline my stroke. So I'm going to go select everything, Object, Path, Outline, Stroke. Shift M again to open up my Shape Builder tool, and now I'm going to try that again. And that's gotten rid of them there. So now we need to create some cuts. You can see we have a cut here, we have a cut here, we have a cut here. We're going to create those cuts right now. So let's grab our rectangle tool. And in the center here, actually it doesn't need to be the center, we can just center a line. Let's just draw a rectangle anywhere for now. Shift X to convert that to a filled object. Center align this. Now we're going to go back to our Rotate tool, or on your keyboard, or it's up here. Find the center, which is here, hold down Alt. See, I'm holding down Alt, those three dots appear, and click. Now we can type in the amount we want to rotate around 360 degrees and how many duplicates we want. Now type in 6 and click on copy. Control D to duplicate, and now we have all of our cutting, well, these are the rectangles we're going to be using to cut. Select everything, Shift M for your shape builder tool, and now we can get rid of the parts that we don't want. Now I'm holding down Alt and I'm clicking and dragging to get rid of all the parts that I don't want. You can do something like this as well. And that's gone, that's all, everything else is gone. Gone, 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 gone. Gone, gone, gone. And I'm going to go Shift E for my eraser tool just to get rid of these stragglers as well. Hold down Alt to get a square rocking on your eraser tool. Okay, so now we have this. We need to duplicate this around in a circle. So of course we just need to select it. Before we do that, actually, just to make life easier for ourselves, let's select everything inside. Well, we need to select everything except for the actual outside, the outer part of this. So just the lines, that's all we're selecting. So what you can do is just grab everything and then hover over this part, hold down Shift and click to deselect. And then we want to group this. Control G on your keyboard to do so. And now we need to find the center point of our document again. So I'm just going to create a circle, center align it horizontally and vertically. That's going to be our guide for when we're using our rotate tool. Select the object that you want to rotate or use the rotate tool on. Click on it. Find the center point, hold down Alt and click. Now we can type in here again 360 divided by 6 and copy. And then we're going to Control D to duplicate that, and again and again and again. So now we can see that we kind of have it more or less. We just need to delete the lines from here, here, and here. So I'm going to grab the lines here, and I'm going to grab the lines here, and I'm going to grab the lines here, and delete. And there we have it. We just need to get rid of that circle, and that is it. So this I'm going to give you in the description below as a PNG, just in case you guys don't have it. So let's just grab this. Hang on a second now. Where is it? It's here. I'm just going to lock these so it'll make grabbing this a bit easier for myself. Okay, so I have this. Control C and Control N to make a new document. Shift Control V to paste that in place. Just going to increase the scale of that. And now I'm going to export this as a PNG. We'll call this pizza crust for no reason, just because it kind of looks like a pizza crust with lines. And let's export that. I'm going to go for a resolution which is high. Now I don't actually know if screen will do or 72 will do, so just to be safe I'm going high and OK on that. We jump back into Cinema. And turn off our interactive render region. Let's create a new material. Call this pizza crust with lines, and we can load this. Turn off reflectance and color for now. Let's load this into our alpha channel. So it is, where is it? It is here. So that's gone into our alpha channel. Now we can apply it to, well, we don't have anything to apply it to yet. So let's create a plane. Let's reduce the width and height segments to 1 because we don't need any segments at all for this. Let's apply this pizza crust material to our plane, and we can bring this down. Let's hit Alt-R to open up our interactive render region. And we need to open up the material, go into the luminance channel and turn that on. Now we're going to get some luminance, And we can just copy out this color here. This hex code that we have, we're using it for all of our objects. Copy the hex code into this luminance channel of our pizza crust with lines material. Okay, so it's getting a bit confusing using the same color for everything, so I might actually just go for a different color. Maybe something like maybe just white. We'll go for white. We can change it later if we want. Now, you can see we're getting some jagged lines here. We can fix that if we go into our render settings, go to anti-aliasing, set this to best and 4x4, and that will improve that for us. Okay, cool. So how is this looking? It's looking pretty good so far. So next we need to create this guy here. So as you can imagine, this guy is probably, well, it's fairly similar to this, just a lot less complicated. You can create it in more or less the same way. So we're going to grab this, Control C, Control N, make a new document and paste that in. Control Shift V to paste in place. Now I'm just going to increase the scale of this. Again, this will be provided in the description. You guys can download it in case you don't have Illustrator. And then we're going to export this. And we're going to call this pizza crust without lines, just pizza crust. And save that as a PNG, high 300 ppi resolution. So now let's create a new material, call it pizza crust. We'll just call it P crust. Open it up and we can turn off color and reflectance, go into our alpha channel, and now we can load in that PNG. Let's give it some color. So we can go for, we'll just try this hex code again. And we can change it later if we want. And we need to create some geometry now to apply it to. So we can create a plane. Just going to bring this down along the Y a little bit, maybe increase the size of it. Reduce the segments down to 1. And let's apply this to it. We can increase or decrease the size as we see fit. So I'm going to go for something like that. So I might reduce the brightness of this. Go into my luminance channel of the P crust material and let's bring the brightness down to 60. That looks a bit better. It's not as it was kind of washing out the rest of our elements. So it looks a bit better now. And we could do that with our grid as well. We could actually increase the brightness on that. And then if we jump into this material, we could go for just something just different to make it all look a bit different. And now that's pretty much it for setting up, as far as our HUD map goes anyway. So we have all of our elements. The only thing we need to do now is put in the logo. So you guys might have your own logo or you might not. But if you have something to put it in. Maybe you have a path or an Illustrator path that you can bring into Illustrator or into Cinema to extrude. If you don't know how to do that, there's actually a video. I did a tutorial on it before. I'll just pop it up there on the top right of the screen, and I'll put a link to it in the description below also. But I'm going to bring in my logo into this now. Just do that right now actually. So I have it open already. Let's copy this, Control C. I'm going to hop back into the project that we're working on and just Control V that in. And let's middle mouse click to go into our top view and just kind of try and center this as best we can. Now again, I'm not going to be providing the logo now in the description, so you guys will have to find something yourselves. Check out the the video that I've posted in the description to check how you can create geometry from Illustrator paths. It's a really handy way to create complicated shapes easily using the pen tool in Illustrator and just importing it into Cinema and extruding it. Okay, so we need to bring this up a bit. Cool. So that's kind of it for the first kind of part of this tutorial. So what I'm going to be doing in the next parts is, well, I might actually add on to this, maybe make it a bit more interesting, and I might not. And then when I'm happy with the setup in Cinema 4D, we're going to be looking at how we can go about setting this up for compositing in After Effects. So we're going to be using object buffers on each of our elements, each of our objects, and then we're going to be able to bring each of them into After Effects, and we're going to be adding some cool effects in After Effects. So it's going to look way better. Also, before we do that, we're going to be animating each of these elements. Okay, so we can start animating the elements now, each of the objects in our scene. So they're all going to be rotating around, you know, they're as HUD rings usually do. So let's set that up now. So the plane, I'm going to go plane 1, which is this shape here. Select it and let's go to coordinates, and we're going to be rotating it around using the heading in the rotation. Let's turn off my interactive render region for now, Alt-R on your keyboard, and let's also extend out our frame range. So we can change this to about, we'll say 300 frames. And let's add a keyframe on the heading here on frame 0 for the plane .1 rotation we're working with now. And let's go to the last frame, and we can, let's set this to about minus 120. We'll go for something like that. See what that looks like. Okay, so I'm happy enough with that. And the next thing we're going to be doing, we might actually just get rid of the easing in and easing out, because as you can see, that's starting off slower, and then it slowly, gradually builds up speed, and then towards the end it's going to slowly ease out. So you guys can turn that off if you want, or leave it on. I'm going to turn mine off. So I need to open up my dope sheet, Shift F3 on your keyboard, and we can select the plane. We just added keyframes for this plane.1 object, and just hit L on your keyboard, or you can click on this button here, and that'll just get rid of the easing in and easing out. So it will now be linear. So it's going to be the same speed the whole way through the animation. So we're going to do the same with this plane object now, which is this object here. So let's go to our coordinates tab, and we'll set a keyframe on frame 0 using heading, and go forward to the last frame, and this time we'll go for a minus 100 on that, and then just add a keyframe again. So now if we have a look at that, okay, so they're both going in the same direction. I actually wanted them to go in different directions, so I didn't. We must have set this one, yeah, we set this to a minus value also. So let's just change this to be plus 100 on the last frame, there again. Add that keyframe. So now they're going to be going in opposite directions. Looks a bit better. So for the next object, which is the atom array, I'm going to be rotating this in the opposite direction again. So we're going to be going clockwise with this one. So let's grab that atom array object, and we can go back to frame 0. Let's add a keyframe there on frame 0, go to the last frame, and then we're going to be rotating this clockwise, so we can give it a value of minus, we'll go minus 50 on that, so it'll be nice and slow. And then we can have a look at that. Okay, cool, happy enough with that. Now for this one, if we try and rotate this, it's going to give us a bit of trouble. This is the sweep. That now we didn't name any of our objects. Maybe you guys did, but I didn't. So that's why I'm referring to these objects as sweep and plane, because we didn't actually name them. Not a good idea, but anyway, we'll keep on going. So the sweep, if I rotate this circle spline, it's gonna, you can see it's messing with our spline. So we don't want to just undoing those rotations there. What we're going to have to do is we can just duplicate this, hold down Control and just drag it down. I'm going to turn this one off. This will be my just in case one. I can always go back to it if needs be. And for this one, middle mouse click on the actual parent and that'll automatically select all of the children. Right click and we'll just go to, let's actually just use C on our keyboard to make it editable, and it'll be converted into geometry. Okay, so now we can rotate this, no trouble at all. I just want to turn off my the visibility of these vertices here, these points. So I'm just going to go into object mode, and now we can set a keyframe for this on frame 0. And then go to the last frame. We're going to go for a minus value on this. No, we're going to go for a plus value on this one. So we'll go 70 and add another keyframe. Okay. So now some of our elements are easing in and easing out in the animation. So I just want to Shift F3 to bring up my timeline, my dope sheet again. Just making sure that I am making each of these animations linear. Just using L on my keyboard. And then they're all going to be changed to a linear animation. So now they're all going at the exact same speed from beginning to end. As in, what I mean is they're not slowing down or speeding up at the start and end of their rotations. Cool. Okay, so that's everything animated. I guess we could animate the JB logo as well, just a little bit. So we need to make sure that the axis the axis here is in the center, because otherwise if we rotate that, I'll just pop into the top view. You can see that the axis is not in the center of the JB logo. So let's put it in the center. We need to enable axis modification. So just click there. And then we can just move this into the center. I'm just going to eyeball it. So that's kind of the center, you could say. And then turn that back off. So now when we rotate that, it is going to rotate around more of a central point. Now again, that was eyeballed. Okay, so it's not going to be exactly center, but it's going to do. So I'm going to add a keyframe there on frame 0. Then we're going to go to the last frame, and we're going to maybe set it to about 40 degrees and add another keyframe. And this time I'm going to leave the easing in and the easing out for the JB logo part, just for mixing it up a little bit. Okay, so we also want a bit of camera movement, just for the sake of it. We're going to stick in a camera, we're going to make it active, and we are going to zoom in to about here. And so this will be our start point. We'll say something like that is going to be the start point. So let's just get our camera, and we can turn off the rotation, parameters and scale, because we just want to be animating the movement here of the camera. So I'm going to add a keyframe on frame 0, go to the last frame, and we're going to Yeah, go to the last frame and let's just zoom out to about there. Something like that. Okay, and I'm going to add another keyframe there. So let's see what that is looking like now. Okay, so what we can do is we can actually just start rendering this out. Before we do that, we didn't add our object buffers. Now our object buffers are what's going to allow us to add glow and change color to each of our, well, the objects that we want to do so inside of After Effects. So we can add an object buffer to, let's say, this sweep, which is this object here. We'll add an object buffer onto that. Then in After Effects, we'll be able to change the color of it. We'll be able to add a glow and all that cool stuff. So I'm going to do that, first of all, to my plane, this one here. I'm going to go right click and go Cinema 4D tags, compositing, and I'm going to go to the object buffer tab, I should say, and enable this. This is going to be our buffer 1. Now we can duplicate this onto our sweep. So I'm not going to do anything with this plane. I have no need to change this in After Effects. I'm happy with it as is. So I'm not going to be using an object buffer on that. But I want one on my sweep, which is this. So we just duplicated this from here down to here. So we need to change the buffer number to 2. And let's do that again for the atom array. And we can change the, will we do it for the atom array? Or will we? No, we won't. We'll leave the atom array as is, just so we can see how it's done. If you guys want to be able to add some glow or whatever to your atom array, then, you know, by all means bring down the object buffer tag and just increase the buffer number to 3. And let's do, yeah, I think that's everything then, really, isn't it? Could do one for the center disk as well. I'll just duplicate this, bring it down, and we'll change this to buffer 3. So now we have 1, 2, 3 object buffers. So we have to reflect that in our render settings. So open up your render settings and let's go to multipass and add in an object buffer. Now that's going to be object buffer 1 covered. Now we need object buffer 2. And we need object buffer 3 as well. Okay, so I'll turn on multipass as well. And now let's set this up for render. So I'm going to go 1920 by 1080. Resolution is fine. We're going to render all frames. And that is good to go for output. Save, we're going to go and save this. So I already had this set up. The path anyway. So this is going to be saved into a folder I named sequence, and I'm calling it main. And the multipass image, so our object buffer image sequences, we need to set that up as well. So these are going to be PNG sequences, and we're going to save these to, so I just set up a sequence folder. And inside there, my object buffers, I have a folder called object buffers set up. And these are going to be called buffers, or whatever you want them to be called. So then that's that. Everything else is fine. Everything else is fine. We have everything else good to go. Okay, so now we can just render to picture viewer on this. So that's going to render away. Now I want to stop this actually. I want to get a bit more definition in my atom array because it's looking a bit pokey. It's not looking very smooth. So I want to increase the rotation segments on that. I'll do that right now. So let's go into my into the atom array, and we can go to the tube actually, not the atom array, the child of the atom array. Go into the object tab and let's increase the rotation segments on that. So now I'll do render to picture viewer again. It'll say it's calculating an image. Do you want to stop it? Yes. And do you really want to overwrite all of the frames that have already been rendered? Yes, we do. So that's looking better straight away. What do I want to do anything else with this? Yeah, I think I do, you know, because everything, you know, I know that we based our HUD rings off of our HUD map in Illustrator, but I still want to play around with this a bit more inside in Cinema to kind of make this a bit more spread out. The elements are kind of looking a bit cramped now. The HUD rings are all kind of on top of each other. So I'll just stop this and say yes. And let's go and just, we'll start just scaling stuff up, I suppose, and bringing it down along the Y or bringing it up or whatever. So that's what I'm going to be doing now. So I'm just going to bring that down along the Y. I just made it bigger. Going to grab this plane object and maybe make it bigger as well. Bring it down a little bit. Grab this sweep and we can scale this up as well. And I wonder, yeah, that's fine. And we can scale that sweep up and we can, maybe I'll actually scale that down. Something like that. Again, this is all up to you now, guys, where you're positioning all of your elements. I'm trying to add a bit of kind of like more of a 3D feel to it. So I'm bringing some of the stuff down along the Y just to kind of get a bit more depth going. Just going to go to my last frame to give me a better idea what this is going to look like kind of when the camera's zoomed out. Atom array, I'm going to scale this down actually quite a bit. And maybe I'll bring it up so it's just slightly above my center disk. So if we look at this, just middle mouse click to hop into our front view, get a better idea of what I've just done. So everything's kind of been stacked now, one on top of the other. And I'm just kind of been eyeballing it to get something closer to how I want it to be, I suppose. Okay, so let's render the picture viewer on this again. And it's going to say, do you want to overwrite? And we do. And that's all going to start rendering away again. So while that's doing its business, we could hop into After Effects and we can start setting up our composition. So let's double click in this panel here, and that's going to open up, well, the import file dialog box. So you just need to find the folder that you saved out your sequences to. So my one's in a folder called Sequence. This is my main here. It's rendering away. And all my object buffers are in here. So you can see that they're just these black and white images. Okay, so I'm just after spotting something there now that shouldn't be. If I open this, let's see what's going on. So it looks like for some reason we're getting the white along our spline. We're also getting it, or our sweep I should say, we have it called sweep. We're also getting the white where our JB logo is, so that shouldn't be what's happening. So let me see what's causing that. So there must be something going on in JB Motion logo. You guys probably won't have this problem because you're probably using your own logo. So it looks like I have object buffers attached to this from whatever I was doing with it previously. So I'm just going to get rid of those. And that should fix our problem. So I'm going to have to render to picture viewer again, stop that and overwrite everything again. So now let's see. If I go to layer and single pass and check object buffer. Yeah, object buffer 2 is now rendering without the JB part. So that's good to know. So yeah, so I had object buffers attached to my JB logo from a previously working on it in a separate file, I imagine. Anyway, so that's fine as is. So let's jump it back into After Effects now. And let's import our sequences. So I just double clicked in this panel here. go into my sequence folder, and let's click on any one of these, make sure PNG sequence is ticked, and that'll bring it in as a sequence from the first frame to the last frame in the correct order. Now we can drag this down to the composition icon and release. That's going to set up a composition for us. Just go to the settings here, and all the settings will be good to go. So we have the frame rate set up there. We just have to increase the duration. We can go for a minute or something. We're not going to need that much time, I'd imagine. And now we can, so we have, this is our main scene. We can see what that's looking like. So now we can start bringing in our object buffers, so we can set this up for adding some nice effects. So let's double click again in this panel here, go into object buffers, click on any one of these object buffers. Now these all have the number 1 beside them because they're all part of the object buffer 1 sequence. So we can click on any one of those. It'll bring in only the object buffers that have 1 at the end of the name there. So we can click on any one of those, import that in. We'll get our sequence then, as much of it is that has finished rendering anyway. So now we have this. So I'm just going to use N to set my work area end there. And now we can just kind of play that and loop over and back. So we have our object buffer in there now. We need to change the blending mode here to screen. So now we're going to be able to see all the other elements, all the other parts of our scene. Now let's go to effects and presets. And we can go for some, so we can change the color of this if we use tint. Now let's just click and drag this down to our buffer object layer there, release that. Now we can, what I like to do as well is I like to drag this effects controls panel out to here. So we'll be able to see both our project and our effects panels side by side, so that's good. And now we can change the color of this. If we just click on map to white, we can go for something like, I'm going to go grab something from my scene, something like this. Click OK. We want to add some glow. Just type in glow there in your effects. Now if you're not seeing this effects and presets panel here, what you want to do is go to window, and it is here. Just make sure that that is ticked and it should pop up for you. So we're going to add the glow, just drag this down. Now that's going to start glowing. We can increase the glow intensity. And we can increase the glow radius to whatever we like. Let me go for something like this. So I have a radius of 94 and an intensity of 4. And now we can get some Gaussian blur. We can put that onto the layer also. And now if we increase this, you'll see what it's doing. So I'm going to go for something like 27.8 or just 27 will be fine. And now you can see that we've added some nice glow to our scene, to our sequence inside of After Effects, and we haven't had to mess around with object glow in Cinema, which is pretty painful, to be fair. So that's cool. So now we can bring in the rest of our object buffers. So let's double click again in this panel here. Let's try and find buffers underscore object underscore 2 this time. So any one of them will do. We can click on any one of them, and then we can just import. As long as PNG sequence is ticked, the whole sequence comes in. Let's bring this down. And before we bring this down, actually, let's just grab all of the effects from our buffers object 1 layer. Hold down control and click. Control C on your keyboard. Now we can bring down this object buffers 2 to our composition. Set the blending mode to screen. And now we can just paste in, Control V, just make sure object 2 is the object buffer's object 2 layer is selected. Hit Control V and then all of our effects will pop in there. So I'm going to turn off Gaussian blur. I'll leave it on actually. Do you know what? We'll leave it on, and I'm going to leave it as that as well. Might change the color, maybe something else. I don't know, maybe red. It's not really in my color palette, but just as an example, we'll go for some red. And you guys can mess around with the glow intensity, the glow radius as well, just to make some changes or as you see fit. Okay, cool. And I think we have one more object buffer to bring into this as well. So object buffer 3. So this one here, let's bring this in. Let's put it down there to our composition, change the blending mode again to screen. And now let's just do a Control V. And then all of our effects are going to come in. Let's turn off blur. Just want to isolate this layer for a second. And I want to see what's going on. It doesn't seem to, the effects don't seem to be having any effect on this particular layer. So there is something going on with the glow. It's probably, actually, I'm unsure of what it might be and why that's happening. So I might just delete buffer 3 and leave it at that, I suppose, for adding glow and effects and all that. Now that's really looks pretty good. What we can do as well is we can grab all of our sequences in our project panel, right click and go to reload footage. Now you'll see that all of the sequences have been reloaded so that all the new frames that have been rendered, so that's fully rendered now, you can see all the new frames that have been rendered have now been brought in. So we can click on our main composition, hit Control A to select all, and we can just drag all of those out. We can also drag our work area end as well to the end of that. And now we can actually watch that from beginning to end, and that'll play over on a loop. So that's pretty cool. Now, adding the effects and all that is really nice inside of After Effects, and it's really useful using the object buffers and all that. But there is another way we could have rendered this, and it would look, I don't know, some people might say it looks 10 times better, and some people might not like it at all. I kind of prefer it, but the only thing is when we do set this up, we're not going to be able to use our object buffers. They're not going to work as well as they would as they are now. Now, I might as well tell you all what I'm talking about, because I'm blabbering on there. I should have just spat it out at the beginning. Depth of field, basically. Now, I'm a huge fan of depth of field in cinema. Well, anywhere really, I suppose. Anywhere where there's imagery involved. So let's see what this would look like set up with depth of field. So let's go into our render settings, and we can set this render here to physical. Go to the physical options, turn on depth of field, and let's set the sampling quality to medium. Now depth of field is going to be turned on. We just need to set up the depth of field settings, I suppose. We have to make our camera, we have to change some settings in our camera. So let's do that now. Select your camera, go into the physical tab, and we need to set the f-stop here to a lower value than 8. So I'm going to go 0.3, and we need to give the camera a focus object. So if we go into my object tab here, you'll see focus object. Now that's going to tell the camera what to focus on. Everything else will be out of focus. So let's create a null for that focus object. We call that focus object, and we can then go back into our camera and just drag this focus object down into the focus object field. So now our focus object null
which is here. We need to bring that up so that it's actually sitting in the center of the JB logo, so that our camera is going to be focusing on that. So you can see as I'm moving that null up and down, you can see that it's having an effect on our camera. So I'm going to put that there, and I'm going to hop into perspective, and I'm going to turn on my interactive render region. And now you can see that depth of field is doing its thing, and it looks pretty cool. And there's no bringing it into After Effects and, you know, adding glows and all that stuff. I think depth of field really does a good job of just making stuff look better. So if I go into this physical tab again and reduce this even more to 0.1, you know, it's kind of, you might say that looks pretty cool, or you might say, no, I don't like it, it's all blurry and rubbish looking. So I might go, I'm actually saying that now, it's a bit too blurry. So I'll go 0.2, and that looks pretty cool. So if we play this now, the camera is going to be zooming out, but because we set up our focus object, the camera is always going to be focused on the JB logo part, and everything else is going to be kind of blurred out. What we could do is we could bring this JB logo part up a bit higher. Now we have to make sure that we're selecting our null as well. In fact, we should probably just make this focus object null a child of the JB Motion logo. Then when we do move it up, well, that's not up. When we do move it up, it'll remain in focus, and everything else is going to be, you know, out of focus. So that is cool. But I'm going to leave my one down wherever I had it. I think I had it somewhere like there. And that's depth of field. So if we were to render this to picture viewer, I mean, you could argue that it's a better result or it isn't. But again, if you guys want to try out depth of field and render that out, work away. If not, then you're going to be messing around in After Effects, adding some nice cool glows to your HUD rings inside of After Effects, both of which are going to look pretty cool. So that brings me to the end of this tutorial, guys. I hope you learned a lot, and if you did, please hit that like button and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.